This video has been a long time coming. Today, I am thrilled to share my conversation with Dan Wiederrecht of Backcountry Bonsai, a true craftsman with a big heart. Getting interviews like this takes a lot of time, coordination, and effort, and I've been working hard to bring more high-quality guests to the channel. The reality is, I rely on sponsors to help make that possible. But starting with this video, I'm also rolling out ad-free versions exclusively on Patreon. So if you'd like to support the channel and help me keep creating content like this, check out the link below. Patrons get early access to upcoming interviews, behind-the-scenes updates, and a chance to submit their own questions for future guests. For example, we've got conversations lined up with Carbonless Koviansky and Evan Pardue from Little Things for Bonsai People. So if you've got a burning question, let me know over on Patreon. Now that that's out of the way, here's our chat with Dan Wiederrecht. Hi, welcome back to another working interview with Rainy Bonsai. I'm your host, Jamie, and today we are here with Dan Wiederrecht. You probably know him as Backcountry Dan, but today he's Dan the Maple Man. Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dan, and I am into bonsai, so here
Beautiful. we are. I see we've got this maple here. Would you mind telling me a bit about this tree in particular?
Yeah, this one's fairly new to me. I bought it last year, but it has since been repotted, and it's been through a season and a half with me now. So we're just doing some deciduous refinement work on this today. So thinning it out a bit. We'll see if just trimming every other leaf off is enough. If not, then we may have to do some actual leaf trimming on the remaining leaves just to get light into the interior, airflow into the interior, and keep it rocking and happy. We're gonna check the wire. There's just a few wires in here, but we'll just check them and see whether they need to come off today or if they need some more time. But if there are any long nodes, we'll just trim those back.
And we're looking for bifurcation, right?
Yeah.
So as much as we can, chase it to that point?
Yeah. There are a few places where I let some weaker growth, particularly here on the front. There was a weak branch here, and I originally let some run a little extra long.
Okay.
But everything else should be fairly balanced. And then I will, even if I take both leaves, if there's a really strong shoot, I'll just take both of the leaves off of that because it's sticking out of the canopy anyway, and it's strong enough.
So we're going through removing just one leaf from each of the pairs here. Could you tell us a bit about why we're doing this? Why is that beneficial for Japanese maple?
Just primarily to get more light and airflow into the interior to keep some of the growth alive on the interior. Otherwise, it will all be shaded out and get less oxygen and just either get unhealthy or just die back. And then we'll have less to cut back to as the tree continues to grow. It can still be ramped up and then cut back and get some back budding, but ideally you'll just keep that happy, and then you never necessarily have to do the back and forth.
So what cultivar is this?
Well, I purchased it. It was originally imported. They were told it was DeSojo. Mm-hmm. That turns a nice red in the spring. And then the person that I bought it from said, I am not convinced it's DeSojo. It was kind of reddish in the spring, but it was not like that deep red that you would expect from DeSojo.
Okay.
And I also had the same experience. I would not.
It's not the color you
I
expect.
wouldn't sell it to someone else as DeSojo. It had a really nice spring color, kind of reddish coral color. It didn't last as long as I would expect DeSojo to last. So my suspicion is probably that it's a seed-grown tree that was grown from DeSojo.
You mentioned Japan. Would you say that as an artist, you're influenced by the Japanese bonsai aesthetic?
I mean, I don't think you can do bonsai and not be influenced by the Japanese aesthetic, but
That's a good point.
I think I personally just like it all. So I really like the rugged aesthetic of our Native American trees and some of the things they offer us that aren't necessarily traditional Japanese bonsai, but I also really appreciate a lot of the work and dedication that's gone into traditional Japanese bonsai, and I would consider this a very traditional
It
tree.
is. And I'm sure you guys will be able to see it a little better when we're done today, but there's a gorgeous trunk in here.
Yeah, Great Nabari. It's just been a very well developed tree over many, many years, probably decades.
So you've got a sizable collection of the Japanese maples here. Would you mind sharing with the audience some of the beginner care tips that you think would have been helpful when you were getting started?
Yes, that's putting it politely. A bit of just as much of a bonsai addiction as I have. I think I have a Japanese maple affliction. So actually, I think the first and most common mistake is probably not what people would expect. And I think what most people do that causes an issue there is they actually shade their trees way too much, particularly in the spring. So there's multiple facets to this. One is the bonsai aesthetic. If they open up in too much shade, you get larger leaves, longer internodes, all the things you don't want for bonsai, and the leaves are far weaker. The growth is weaker, but they also wake up long before it's actually spring here. So as soon as the buds are swelling and the leaves are threatening to open up, I have them on carts if possible, or pallets or whatever, since I have so many.
Right? To make
Make it easier, the shuffle. And I am moving them out there into the sun absolutely every day that I can. I have them out there. I think the wind helps toughen them up, and absolutely the sun. If they open up in the sun, the leaves are nice and small usually, and they're a lot tougher.
So I feel like things would be amiss if we didn't take an opportunity to discuss the ethics of collecting trees, collecting Yamadori. I know that's one thing that you in particular are very passionate about, is making sure that it's being done ethically and sustainably. Would you mind sharing some of your thoughts on that?
It's all kind of up to each of us to do our best to be ethical and to be legal, and to, if you're going somewhere on private land, you ask permission. If you're going to go on public land, you make sure, one, that it's legal, and two, you check with the appropriate jurisdiction and get permits if they have them. And if they don't, then maybe don't go there. We don't collect on national parks, but national forests do transplant permits, same with state land, BLM. All of those places have avenues to legally collect trees. It's like any other sort of natural resource that we can get permits to go out and harvest or use. If we all, collectively work together to do our best to not overuse or damage any resource, then it should be there for everybody. And it seems common sense to me. Apparently it's not to everyone, so we try to educate on that too. Sure. But there is a sentiment out there anymore. I hear it more and more that the humans are a blight on the earth, and that we shouldn't ever touch anything in nature and all that. And I mean, I kind of get that sentiment, but at the same time, what are we if not also nature and part of the whole natural world? And everything we are and use and do is a product of this earth as well. And we like to not only create our own dwellings and livelihoods, but we like to create art and beauty, and those things also are made from natural resources. So it's just, again, do it responsibly and ethically as much as possible, and care enough to do it responsibly, ethically, and then we can all enjoy it.
I want to ask you some beginner questions about collecting. These are some questions that I've seen on the internet come up a lot.
Yep.
And if you could just share your honest opinion on these. I know some of the questions, those of us that know bonsai, like our hair's going to curl as soon as you hear it. But I think it's important that we not be afraid to ask this stuff so that we can all learn to be better. So, Dan, I was down at the park yesterday and there's just this like really, really awesome crab apple. Can I just go cut a branch off and stick it in the ground?
Probably not.
No.
Especially, I mean, it's a public park for one.
Wait,
So
collecting at a public park is frowned upon?
I mean, there might be people that don't appreciate it. There are avenues you could approach them and say, hey, what if I supplied a much nicer looking nursery tree to replace this, and would you allow me to dig it and replant? That I've done that.
So it can be done,
yeah.
but it's about asking permission, not
Yes.
just going for it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there are places where there's so much jurisdiction that their instant response is no, and
And that's that.
that doesn't mean you just go do it anyway. It just means you probably go find somewhere else.
Okay. So if it's the middle of July, but I'm about to move, and there's this really sentimental maple in my yard, can I just dig that up and slap it in a bonsai pot?
I wouldn't do it in a bonsai pot.
Not in a bonsai pot.
Yes, I would dig a large root mass and put it in a nursery can with nursery soil out of the ground and take it with me, and then I would do the bonsai work, either the next spring or even another spring later than that, once it's recovered.
Okay, so I found this like really, really cool, like 10-foot tall spruce, but the first branch doesn't start till like 4 feet up. Can I just top it and bring it home, wait for it to grow a new branch?
No.
No.
Not on a conifer. Nope, not on a spruce, or a pine, or a juniper. Or
I'm not
anything.
naming names, but you know who you are that asked that.
Nope. You could get away with that with a deciduous tree, possibly. And, I mean, so I won't say it can't be done with a deciduous tree in July. You could possibly chop the tree and dig it and put it in a bonsai pot, and it might survive, but still not the way I would go about it personally. Mm-hmm. But no, a conifer, you just don't even worry about the 10-foot tree.
Right. Right, you gotta
Find
work
a
with what's
smaller one.
there.
Yeah, if it had a whole bunch of growth near the bottom, down low, that was already there, you could maybe cut some of the top growth out. But I would never. You'll never get it to sprout like a deciduous tree.
Would you mind speaking to some of your preferred resources whenever you're doing a deep dive and trying to learn something new about bonsai?
Oh, well, I pretty much go everywhere I possibly can. So, but not everybody has that time or inclination. Some of the best resources I've ever found online would be some of the top professionals on YouTube, and then they also have personal sites like Ryan Neal, Bjorn. Oh gosh, Andrew Robson has great deciduous stuff. Learn from a professional, at least. Not just anybody that's willing to give information, but people with quality trees.
Now, if I were wanting to learn to better identify a quality tree, how would I go about that?
Multiple ways. I mean, there are authors who have written specifically about that, like Jonas Dupuis, and I think especially his new book, he dives into that. But then I also learned from Michael Hagedorn what made quality in a good bonsai. I learned from watching a lot of the other professionals, and I learned really, I think personally, the same way I learned a lot of like photography and things. When I got into photography, I looked at thousands and thousands and thousands of photographs and figured out what I really liked and what didn't speak to me as much and everything. And so
And learn
I
to
did the
emulate
same
that.
thing because I'm a bit obsessive when
A
it comes
little
to
bit.
stuff. I did the same thing with bonsai, and I still do to this day. I just look at thousands and thousands and thousands of trees.
Gorgeous. So you guys should be able to see a little bit more of that trunk now that we're done defoliating and doing some light pruning of the shoots. Okay, so we're gonna swap trees around and move on to another maple. See you guys in just a moment. This video is sponsored by Rent a Toyota. If you've ever tried getting your own car into the mountains, or battled crosswinds driving through Wyoming, you know why I went looking for a better option. I rented a blue Tacoma for the weekend and immediately fell in love. They offer affordable day rates on brand new Toyotas, including off-road packages if you're heading into the rough stuff. Whether you're road tripping or just want to try something different for a few days, it's a super convenient way to drive what you need when you need it. Rent a Toyota launched their pilot program right here in Denver off Arapahoe, and they've been expanding ever since, so be sure to check if they're in your area yet. So we're going between trees, so we're practicing good horticulture here. Got some alcohol prep pads, and we're just cleaning our tools so that we're not moving any illness, sources of infection from one plant to the other.
Both trees are super healthy, so it's probably not an issue, but I like to be safe. So this one is a lot younger tree, but it's a really fun little maple.
Yeah, there's a great trunk in here.
Yeah. Grown by, and I might botch his name. I'm sorry if you see this and I got it wrong, but it's Dylan, I think it's Ferreira or something like that, but he's Cedar Rose Bonsai.
Cedar Rose? Okay.
Excellent field grower out of California, and
Yeah.
would love to see more deciduous growers do
Yeah, there's...
specific effort into the bases and the movement of the tree.
Before we jump in too far here, I want to check with you before I start cutting. Would I chase this back, each one into the interior node, or do you want that second node?
Let's go to the second node for now until we get through the whole tree, and then I might come back.
You got it.
So this tree's about 2 years out of the field, I believe. And just, they have grown like mad for me the first couple of years. And so, but, which is perfect. You can use that vigor to really help them establish into the bonsai container and establish all of the future branching, and then start to slow them down for refinement.
Do you do any growing from seed, or is it mostly collected material and then more refined stuff?
I do. I like all of it. Seed, cutting, air layers. I find a lot of enjoyment in all of the different approaches.
I'm right there with you. Like, even starting seeds, I know I'm probably not going to see those as a finished tree, but it's just rewarding.
You know, I mean, it's definitely doable. Jonas Dupuy, Eric Schrader, some of those guys out in California, they've developed in about 15 to 20 years really, really high quality black pines even that have been shown, either Shohin and even larger. So if it can be done with pines, it can sure be done with maples too and other deciduous. Black pines would probably be the fastest pine for growing a pine from seed, but this one we may do even more of a almost full defoliation, just as strong as it is, but we'll start with cutting back all the long nodes and then a leaf in each pair, and we'll just see what we have from there.
Of course.
But this is one of his his dwarf maple selections. I don't think it's a named cultivar, but it's a more of a dwarf maple selection that has shorter internodes, and I think eventually smaller leaves once I slow it down enough. But
Now, you say eventually. In your head, what kind of timeline is eventually? Like, do you think that's a 3-year process? A 1 year?
it's actually, I mean, I've seen it happen in 1 year. It's vigor of the tree and time in the pot is really what it all boils down to. The longer the tree is in the pot, the smaller the leaves usually tend to get, and the shorter the internodes get. There's usually a maximum. If they start to get too small, then you're in need of a repot. So I have a nice Telperian maple that the first couple of years I had it, the leaves were every bit as big as the biggest leaves on here. And then the first year in a pot, they might have been barely noticeably smaller. Next year in a pot, they were
when you
smaller.
started
And this year,
noticing
they're actually a pretty nice size. But then I have cuttings from that exact same tree that are in fairly small pots that have little teeny tiny leaves. And you wouldn't ever think that they were the same tree. So I know if I want to get them that small, I absolutely can. And it's just a matter of the bonsai soil and the small pot. There's a lot of different approaches these days, but I don't generally fertilize any of my refined maples until they've done that first flush, and then I might give them a tiny little dose or a few doses of something like kelp or something like that, just to keep some nutrients in there. But I'm not pushing any growth. I'm not fertilizing anything heavily personally, because I'm not necessarily going for crazy amounts of speed. My main concerns for what I'm developing are quality root base and good movement and things like that. Once all those things are in place, I will maybe put the gas on a little bit with the fertilizer and help build a trunk up if that's my goal. But I don't want it to put all that energy
into it
until it's got the things that I want to accentuate. Because basically you're accentuating whatever's there. If it's not a good root mass or not a good root base and not good movement in the trunk, and you're gassing it like crazy with fertilizer, then you're just building more of what you don't want that you have to fix.
You were touching a little bit on fertilizer. Would you mind talking us through what you like to use for fertilizer?
For years I've used fish emulsion or hydrolyzed, however you pronounce that, fish. That's done really well for years. I'm experimenting a little bit right now with what Todd is using, the NPK raw.
It's good.
And it's done really well for me too. So I know I'm not doing near as much of it as Todd is. That's just practical for me. I don't have the time.
With this particular tree, can I ask, do you have a vision for how you want to tackle it? Like moving forward?
It's been a bit of a conundrum, actually. I have multiple fronts that I like.
Understandable.
Are we to a point where we can really see the trunk movement yet?
We're getting there.
tremendously.
Y'all will be able to see soon.
So what's visible right now, the base is actually better on what is currently the back for what I chose. But there's more under here. But if you can see on the camera, there's a lot of movement and it wraps back and down and around. There's a lot of great branching options. And I did remove one heavy one on the back, or on the bottom here, that will get fully removed. But I didn't want a bunch of dieback, so I left a stub, and then I'll finish it later.
Now that's a real pro tip right there. So just want to reiterate that for the newer folks in the audience. With deciduous trees especially, we don't want to fully prune back to the trunk, like leave a little space for dieback, and then once that dries out, cut it back to where you actually want it. Because if you don't do that, you are rolling the dice, and sooner or later, you're going to kill off a part of the tree that you weren't trying to on accident.
Particularly with these high water mobility trees like maples. They're just moving so much through their system, and they can just, all of a sudden they tend to just kill off a whole section if you're moving too fast with them. So, but there's another front that I like kind of over here, and even on the opposite side of the back. There's a lot of good options with this tree.
There really are.
I've debated on whether or not to have branching all the way up the trunk just because of all the crazy movement, whether it'd be better almost more and have more of the foliage coming off the top, but there's such great branching off the trunk that I'm not ready to
say goodbye
to that yet, and I'm gonna develop it for now and see what it looks like, and then I'll remove things. We're gonna go back a little bit harder on this one.
Absolutely. I'm happy to, just
super strong
That's how I'm
shoots.
told.
We're just gonna take everything off. So
Okay.
like these top ones, any large leaves extending out, we're gonna take off.
Okay, so now it's more about silhouette.
Yeah, because this one is still very strong out of collection. And so we're not doing a full defoliation, but we're definitely doing more
Than you typically would?
more than we would on like that other much older, more refined tree.
Yeah, so why wouldn't we do a lot of defoliation on a more refined tree?
Well, I mean, one, it's just older and slower moving, more years in a pot. And so it doesn't have the vigor that these younger trees, especially out of the field, have to respond. And if you remove too much, you're just weakening the tree and you're not actually gaining anything.
Right.
You're not like what we want here, what we're attempting to create. And I'm not saying you can't do it with an older tree, but you would have to basically make that old tree young again. You'd give it a whole lot more fertilizer and you'd push it a whole lot farther. But then you would start to lose all of that aesthetic that you've gained and the old.
So it rolls back the clock.
Yeah. But sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you need to take it out of the pot and put it in a larger pot or a box or something and reinvigorate the tree and maybe cut back branches and get new back budding and everything in there and kind of restart on some of the refinement. But I think the goal is to keep just a steady pace where the tree is healthy but growing steadily throughout the tree. No one place is stronger than anywhere else on the tree. And it really does, you can, I don't know. I've seen trees that are, and that one's actually, I need to take a good photo of it without any leaves. It's not as refined as somebody might think from looking at the canopy. But the really good ones, the trees that I gravitate toward as far as old refined maples, the branches have excellent taper and they get finer and finer and finer, and you have really fine twigging, and maybe they're not necessarily as dense as possible. Like you'll see some that are just dense, really dense. But
some of them have like this nice negative space.
They're also
to them.
kind of coarse a lot of the time because somebody's pushing them like crazy with fertilizer so that they can constantly push back, trim, almost hedge pruning or something like that. And then they're getting more and more and more shoots, which is what we're doing at this stage with this tree, is we're doing a heavier defoliation to get more shoots. But as it gets more refined and older, then I don't want more shoots. I do want those negative spaces, and I want to see delicate twigs that come out and start to arc up towards the sun. And you see that age and delicate nature of like a really fine maple bonsai, where I've seen trees that are far just as old and beautiful as that tree as far as the trunk and the Nabari, but they're obviously given tremendous amounts of fertilizer and cut back hard every year, and you don't see the transition of taper in the branches as much, and you see this coarse twigginess that there's a lot of ramification, which some people prefer that, but it's not
quality
really fine,
ramification?
refined, delicate twigging, and I would prefer a little bit sparser tree with that really delicate look versus a really twiggy,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
kind of clunkier silhouette.
Thank you.
So that's
can-
something else you learn from looking at tons and tons of
Can we
pictures.
spin this around? I'd like to show
Yeah.
the audience where you're at and then where I'm at, and have you tell me, am I going too hard or not hard enough?
Nope. I mean, it looks like I'm going harder than you are, so
Okay.
I think you're good.
Okay, so that's him,
But,
and here's where I was.
yep. Oh, well, where you're at. If you were here, I was going to say no, but over there you're close.
Okay,
But yeah, like
Yeah.
here we're going to,
do some more.
yeah, we're just
Okay.
going to kind of keep chasing it back. And
You got it.
we're not going to take any weak, really interior stuff off, but we're going to take any big,
Of course.
probably large to medium leaves off of the exterior of this tree.
Yeah, so we just finished up defoliating both of the maples, and I want to show you just a side-by-side the two approaches we were taking today. So on this one, it's a more refined tree. We were conservative with that defoliation so that we're not encouraging a new flush of growth. But on the less developed tree, we were a lot more aggressive.
It still looks quite full, but there is a lot more space in here for, maybe not from that angle, but especially from these angles for light and airflow to penetrate the tree. I could still possibly decide I need to come back here before too long and reduce the size of some of these larger leaves. I don't think I need to do that yet, but we'll see. I may change my mind as this goes another couple of weeks. But yeah, my goal with this one is to continually to keep it healthy and happy and beautiful, but to slow it down and get that really refined aesthetic of finer and finer twigging, not necessarily too dense, because I like that delicate look rather than just a really twiggy tree. Obviously I want it refined and twiggy, but there's a balance there, I think, for a really good Japanese maple,
Of course.
where it's really delicate and has that aesthetic, even though it still has a really nice strong trunk, good movement. That's what I like in maples. And this one, since we're still developing the early stages of branching and ramification, we went, like you said, much harder. And our goal is to generate a second flush of growth and a second set of bifurcation and more ramification just all around. And then continue, this fall I can continue branch selection, see if I need to add any wire, anything like that. And we also discussed fronts. There's multiple front options on this tree, but that's one. This is a current favorite of both of ours, I think, somewhere in here. Over here's good. There's a lot of fun things we can do with this. So
They're really
another shout out to Cedar Rose for developing great deciduous.
Before I let you go today, do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to share with the audience?
Have fun.
Have fun. Love it. That's really what bonsai should be all about.
Yeah. Trees are magic. So enjoy
Absolutely.
the ride.
Well, thanks so much, Dan. Catch you guys around next time.
Yep.